Yo guys, and welcome back to the channel. Hope you guys are doing fantastic as usual, and today we're gonna be continuing our work on the To-Do application, just like usual. And in the last episode we actually implemented some really neat subtasks. So now we can add a task like buy some milk, but we can also add subtasks underneath that task. So we can have something like milk number 1, milk number 2, milk number 3. I'm not really sure what subtasks you would have for buy some milk, but maybe you have something like that. But I also feel like it would be kind of nice here, like I said in the previous episode, it would be kind of nice if we had a drag and drop for this as well. It kind of depends on how you want to sort this. You can let the user sort it by using something like drag and drop. You can also sort it programmatically, sorting by order here if the subtask has been completed or not. So that is also really nice, if you check it off here, maybe you don't want it in your face anymore, so you put it at the bottom and then you only have the most relevant subtasks at the top. And that is something we implemented for the normal tasks when we didn't have this really cool board layout, when we had like just a vertical list. So it's kind of like these subtasks are really what we had for the tasks as well. So there's a lot that can be applied there. If you haven't watched the first videos of this series, feel free to do that, because you can also learn about different ways to sort them and stuff like that. But for the subtasks, I feel like it would be kind of nice to have drag and drop. That's what I personally feel like would be the nicest, so that the user can just move them around as they please. And that should also be really easy with the beautiful library Svelte D&D action, which we have used in multiple places now. So it should be really straightforward to implement this here as well. We currently have this flex call. This is just a vertical layout for these subtasks. It would be very easy now to add that D&D zone action to this divider here to make it drag and droppable. And then we also need to have some handle D&D consider and handle D&D finalize, but that's about it. That's how straightforward the Svelte D&D action library is. So let's have a look at to-do board. That is where we implement that, I believe. So we have this or maybe to-do column rather, yeah. So this is where we have it. These are the 3 lines of code that we need to apply to this divider here. So let's just copy them right off. I don't think we're gonna change much in them anyways. So we can just copy them straight off here, and as you can see, we have some functions to create here, but that should hopefully be very easy. So it's only really this top part. We have this dropped into zone to simply set this task status based on the column status, but we're not going to be dealing with some complicated statuses here. We simply have a completed flag that says, is this subtask completed or not? Not a lot of status types, so we can just copy them over here. So I have D&D consider and D&D finalize, and consider is just when you're hovering, when you haven't really decided where you're gonna drop it, and the layout needs to be kind of redrawn, to show the different levels of the subtasks. But when you finalize is when you actually drop the item, when you actually feel happy with your decision, and then you finalize it, and then we also just redraw it. So it's very easy. So we can simply set subtasks here. That should be pretty simple. So we have this subtasks. All we need to do is this here, and we just set it to e.detail.items that comes from Svelte D&D action. Then we have use D&D zone, and this is the Svelte action. If you don't know about Svelte actions, feel free to read about it. I can't really describe it that well, but it's just like vanilla functionality. You can have vanilla DOM handlers, and Svelte D&D action made this a Svelte action just because it was the most flexible and easy way to do it when it comes to this. We can simply just add this use D&D zone, and then we have a D&D zone. It's quite a justifiable decision to make that an Svelte action. So we can just import that real quick. Then the items here will just be the items that we already have. So this will be this here that we're actually looping over. So items should be subtasks, and that should hopefully be it. Let's see if it works. And boom, it actually seems to work, doesn't it? The only thing that we need to look at here is that this subtask does not have a background, so it's kind of inheriting. It gets this weird transparency effect that I didn't really think was possible, but it is possible. So we just need to add BG white here, I think, so that we actually have like a solid background of the task card. And boom, that problem is solved. And we also have drag and drop. Isn't that amazing? That was super straightforward, wasn't it? And that's all with the help of Svelte D&D action. I cannot express my love for this library. And one thing that we need to consider here is that whenever we finalize this, when we have made a decision, we also need to save this to local storage simply because we have reordered it. So if I reorder it like this now and reload, hopefully that should not save. No, it doesn't save. So we need to make sure that we're actually dispatching updates. So that should be super straightforward. We have this onUpdate function that we can simply call that whenever something, the internal data has changed, and that is the case when we have, reordered them in this array, then we just update and save to local storage the new version. So now if I move this around and make this like a reverse order and reload, will it work? Yes, it will. Isn't that amazing? So now we have drag and drop implemented, and that took like 5 minutes to implement. Super straightforward. Another functionality that I've been thinking about implementing for a while now is actually deadlines. So deadlines could be kind of more suitable for project management system when you're like super strict about things, like you really need to solve this task before this date or someone's gonna come knocking on your door or something. But I also feel like it's kind of suitable for a personal to-do application, which this kind of is. So it would be kind of nice to have some simple deadlines. If I said that I want to do my homework before this time, I just kind of want a quick little reminder when I open my to-do application that I can see that, oh, this is due in like 2 days and I need to get some work done. So that's kind of the point of a to-do application as well, to get stuff done. And if you don't really set a deadline, then it could kind of be hard. So I feel like it would be really nice functionality to add some simple deadlines that you can set for each task. I feel like we should also just put this on the task card. I'm not really sure what the nicest design here is, but I guess we can do some market research to get some inspiration for how to design this. So yeah, so let's have a quick look here. We have some deadlines. We said like 1 day, 2 day, 4 days. Let's see, is there anything else? We have like a deadline here, I assume. One of the things that I really like is this kind of relative stuff, yesterday, today, tomorrow. It really provides, especially if it's like close in time, then it's really nice to know that, yeah, this is due in 2 days, not like the actual date. If I don't know the date, I'm not really good at keeping track of dates all the time. So it would be kind of nice to know that tomorrow it is due, or in 2 days it is due. And of course, if it's really far off, if it's in like 1 year or something, then I just want the date. I don't want it to say like in 365 days. That would be kind of strange. So it would be kind of nice to just show that date. If it's more than 1 week or something, we just show the normal date. Otherwise, we show like a relative kind of text string. But we also need some kind of data format. We need to have some data structure, something to store this in. And I feel like it would be kind of suitable here to use a timestamp. There's multiple ways to do this really. You could have like a string which has like time zone information embedded in it, but I'm kind of scared of that. I don't really like using strings. I feel like strings are quite fragile and hard to tell what the result will be. So I feel like it would be nice here to use an actual number for this, an actual Unix timestamp. So if you don't know about these Unix timestamps, that is the kind of seconds or milliseconds passed since 1st of January 1970 or something. So I just search for this. So Unix timestamp. You can see that this is it's a way to track time as a running total of seconds. It starts at the Unix epoch on January 1st, 1970. So the Unix timestamp simply measures how many seconds or milliseconds has passed since that epoch time. So it's really a nice way to compare times, especially at like milliseconds. You can have a lot of accuracy then, because you know that 1 second is 1000 milliseconds and stuff like that. So we can just simply compare these, and the vanilla date API also can handle these milliseconds very well. So I feel like no need to introduce some weird string format. We can just implement some Unix timestamps here. So why not add that property here then? So we can add something like deadline, and this will be a number. And I really like this as well, that we have a number here instead of a string. I feel like strings can really be anything, but a number is a bit more strict and say that this is actually gonna be a number and not contain all kinds of weird characters that we need to parse and handle and stuff like that. I guess we can add this real quick to the actual task card and see if it shows. So if I just do something like data.deadline, we can see that it is shown here by VS Code. And we also need to add it here, of course, since this is the task creation. This task that I created here will be undefined because we haven't assigned anything to it. But if I create a new one, we can see that this is now 0, which we defined here. But I also feel like it should be optional for the user to select a timestamp. All of these tasks are not going to be urgent. It's not like all of these tasks need to have a deadline. So we kind of need to change this up. We only need to show this deadline if it actually exists. So we can add or null here. So it will be number or null, and the null will be when the user has not set a deadline. So I feel like the default here should also be null. We don't set a default deadline. If the user wants to select a deadline, we can handle that in the edit task modal or something like that. But we also need to think about how to display this. So if I add like tags now, we can see that it will kind of conflict since we have a lot of stuff here. If I close it, we can see that it's shown here, and underneath we show the actual deadline. I'm not really sure how to structure this. We could show it next to it. You know, we could do this with the flex layout. It kind of depends on how many tags the user is going to have. If they have like only one tag, which is kind of the norm, I would say, you know, we put a category on it or something. It's not like there's going to be loads of tags. So perhaps we could do something like a div and then flex to have a horizontal layout, and then do something like justify between. How will this look? It will kind of work out, you know, but I feel like it looks weird to have this justified to the end here unless there are tags, which we can kind of handle very easily. So if I just do conditional classes in Svelte, we can do something like this. We only want to apply justify between if data.tags.length is more than 0. So if the task has any tags, we want to add this class. Otherwise, we simply don't show it. So we can simply have just a normal flex, and nothing will happen. We'll just have it to the left there. And of course, we also want to have some items center to vertically center this. I guess there's some weird margin here. So if I remove this, margin top 1, we can remove that. We can see that it's now centered a bit better there. I feel like that looks all right. Maybe we can add some icons or something cool. I'm not really sure. Also, it's kind of become a problem here. So I think we need to add flex wrap here as well. So if we have like very many tags, I think we need to wrap here instead. So if I do something like this, how will that look? Yeah, so this is kind of what I'm talking about. It would be optimal to put it here or something, but I'm not really sure if that is possible with flex. Feel free to comment if you know about that I could like handle it or justify it. I'm not really sure. I'm not really a flex expert. So feel free to comment if you know a way to do that without too much, you know, complex grid or something. Just an easy way to do this would be nice. But I feel like this also looks okay, you know. We can have this deadline underneath here. Note there's shadowed. Let's see here. Maybe we can have like an icon here with Iconify library that we're using. So iconify.design is the website. We can browse some icons here and perhaps find something like a deadline. Okay, that was not right. I guess we're gonna do like a calendar icon or something for that. Calendar, let's have a quick look. Is there any calendar, maybe like a clock? If I search for calendar clock, yeah, that's more like it. This is more, it gives a more urgent vibe to it. So I feel like this one looks pretty nice. I just copy this Svelte component here. And if I put this here, how will that look? Okay, it kind of broke everything. We need to import it as well. Boom. There we go. And I guess we can make this a flex container as well, so that we can have some horizontal layout here. So do flex and then flex gap 1. And there we go. Okay, that kind of broke it, or did it? I guess we can do items center here to vertically center that. And there we go. If I remove some of these tags now, will that work? Yes, it will. Isn't that amazing? So that's really good. Now we can see if we can handle this now. So we have null here. We only want to show this deadline then if there actually is a deadline. So we can do something like if data.deadline isn't data.deadline isn't null. So we only show that deadline if it exists, simply if the user has set a deadline. And boom, now we're not showing those anymore. And we can see that that is showing 0 there. So, like I said, it would be kind of nice to have this kind of relative thing where we can show that in a relative text string, like tomorrow, yesterday, or in 2 days, or, you know, something like that. And I think there's actually some new modern time APIs implemented, built in JavaScript now that we can actually use. You know, previously there were a lot of like these kind of date libraries that were kind of large, you know, they had a lot of functionality, and that's kind of a problem with some of these things. They are very general, but they also implement a lot of stuff that we're not actually going to be using. So always good to think about that and not waste users' bandwidth too much, and also slow down the page, of course. So that's not something we want to do. But there's actually something built in for this, I think. So you can search Google for this. I think relative time string API JS or something. Relative time format, faster than relative time strings in JS. So you can see, yeah, this is exactly what I want. Last year, tomorrow, maybe not in 2 minutes, but just like in 2 days or something. Let's have a quick look here. So they have this kind of very general approach here that we don't really need to utilize, but maybe something like this instead. Tomorrow we can copy this and make a function out of it. So we can do something like get relative date, get relative deadline, something like that. Get relative deadline text, and then we can pass in the deadline here, which will be the timestamp, and we return a string. So RTF here is that relative time format object and format 1. So this here is actually the difference. So, you know, 0 is going to be today and 1 will be tomorrow, and -1 will of course be yesterday. So we want to get the difference between the deadline date and the deadline timestamp and now. So we want to see how many days are between now and deadline. So this should hopefully be pretty easy. We can get the current timestamp value, the current Unix epoch, just this moment, just this millisecond. So we can do something like now, and we can do date.now. I think this will return a number as well. Let's have a quick look. Yeah, it returns the number of milliseconds elapsed since midnight, January 1st. That's exactly what we want. And then we want to get the difference in days. So we need to do some math here. We want to get the difference between those two dates, or these two timestamps. So if I just do something like that, and I do something like diff, if I just log out this diff now, what will happen? I guess I'll get like a really high value, because I'm gonna get like a negative value, I assume. Yeah, this is gonna be 0, and this is gonna be like 16 millions or something like that. Let's have a quick look. If I just try using this here, let's see what happens. We get undefined, of course, since we're not returning anything, and yeah, we get this really large negative number, which we don't want to use. So we actually need to define some kind of deadline. So I guess we can just try getting something hard-coded here. So there's actually a really nice website for this called Epoch Converter, which we can use here to get a Unix timestamp for different times. So if I now set this to tomorrow, what will happen? We will get the timestamp, yep, and then we can copy this here and put that into the item create. So we're just gonna assign a temporary default value here. And let's see if this will work now. So if I add a new task, yeah, we can see that there's actually some milliseconds there. Isn't that amazing? So now we can actually start converting that, and we want to get the difference here in days. So we need to convert these milliseconds into days. We have 1000 milliseconds for 1 second, and then 60 seconds for a minute, and then 60 minutes for an hour, and then 24 hours for a day. So hopefully now we should get 1 day or something. Yeah, so 0.99. So we can just convert this. I guess we want to do math.ceil here to actually round it up. So we can do something like math round, or, you know, we can do something like diff. Then we can do something like rounded, and then we can do math ceil here. So we're just kind of keeping the code a bit cleaner than putting a lot of nested stuff. So rounded, and then we can log that out, or we can just put it in here. We can have rounded now and actually use this here. So formatting that, and then we can try returning that. And let's have a quick look if that will work. 19,000 days ago, yeah. But we see tomorrow, that works. Isn't that amazing? So now we can see tomorrow. And just like I said, this will be null or something. We don't want to handle that. I think it's like undefined, or I'm not really sure. Yeah, it's undefined, I assume. So I'm not really sure what is actually returned here. Let's have a quick look. I guess it's just 0. Yeah, it's 0, of course. So it's just invalid. Let's just remove these tasks. They are a thing of the past. So we have tomorrow. Isn't that amazing? Let's try yesterday's. If I set these to 18th and put that in here and put that into the item create and try creating a new task. Yesterday, it works. Isn't that amazing? So now we can actually start using this. And just like I said, we also want to handle if this is like very far off in the past. So if I said like 1 year from now, we don't want to show like this how many days are left since that. So if I start adding this, you can see in 365 days, we don't want to show that, of course. So we can just handle this differently here. So if this diff days or whatever, if this rounded is more than 7, then we simply want to return this as a date or something like that. So I guess we can do something like, we can create a date from this timestamp. So we can do something like const date is new date, and then we can put can put in that deadline timestamp. Now I think there's also an API for creating dates here with like a more localizable thing, so that the user's time zone, all of that is respected, and their date format and stuff like that. So format date intel or something, date time format, that's what I'm looking for. So I think we can actually use this new intel date format, and I think we can actually just pass it in like that. Yeah, hopefully that should be enough. And this locale here, we can just set this to default, I think, to make it follow the user's browser settings. I think the same thing here, hopefully. Let's try if that works out. So you can see tomorrow and yesterday works, and yeah, there we go. It shows 2024 instead. I feel like that looks really nice. And of course you can go even further here. You can start like displaying times and like actual seconds or milliseconds when the deadline should be, or when the task should be completed, but I feel like days are enough for my purposes at least. So only showing dates, like only showing the date like tomorrow, yesterday, or in one day or something like that. But I actually realized now, if this is actually like today but in like 30 minutes, it's gonna be like still rounding it up, I believe. So let's try that just to make sure that we can handle this. So if I set it to like actually now, or like in 1 hour, it will actually show tomorrow, I think, here. And that's not something we want. So let's see here. If I create a new task, it's gonna show tomorrow, and we don't want that. So I guess if it's less than 1, or do we want to round down here? I'm not really sure. I kind of feel like it would be easier here to use like midnight here, so you can actually get the current date midnight instead of getting like date.now or something, so that we can actually handle this relatively without having any issues. Because if I just round it down now, and I'm like more than halfway past the day or something, then of course it's going to still show today, because like the difference here between, you know, tomorrow and today will be less than 1 day, even though I'm gonna have like, so we need to work, so I feel like it would be easier here to work with midnight, since we're not gonna be handling 1.5 days anyways. So let's have a quick Google. So yes, get current day midnight. Let's have a quick look. So new date, set hours. We set just setting the hours here to midnight, so that should be pretty easy. So new date returns the current date, and we can do something like date now, set hours 0000. Let's see now if this will work better. And of course here instead we want to get time now to get the milliseconds that has elapsed since epoch. So now it shows today. Let's have a quick look. If I add tomorrow, and this, I think this was actually tomorrow. I copy this, and this was tomorrow. And if I set one that is actually today, so it's gonna be like this, then this should still convert it so that it will still be. But of course these should also be 0, so this should be midnight. They should all be midnight. We need to make sure that they're all midnight when we're saving them as well. So if I set this to midnight of today, then I want this to show today still. So today and tomorrow, and if I set this to 22, then it will hopefully show in 2 days. I hope so. And yeah, it shows in 3 days. That was actually in 3 days rather than in 2 days. So that seems to be working. And if I set one now that is like really far off, in like 2 months or something like that, boom, let's see what happens. Yeah, so it actually just showing the date. That looks decent enough, so really nice. Let's try now also adding a tag and see if that works. If I just put like health or something like that, and we can see that it can coexist with that tag without breaking completely. So I feel like this design could definitely improve, but it's good enough for my use case. So let's actually now get to setting a deadline. So that is of course important. We don't want to hard code these deadlines. We can set this to null by default, and also see if I can remove some of these debug statements that we were having somewhere to do item actions. Okay, they were from really old debug statements, so let's not deal with that now. But I had a new task now. I can see that it does not have a deadline. So nice. I guess that's a good starting point. So now when I have this task, I want to be able to add a deadline if I want. So now we need to think about how to design this. We currently have these tasks here, and I don't think that is clear enough. You know, the user sees a lone little plus symbol there and has no clue about what that is supposed to mean. But you can see you can kind of make some sense out of it, but it would be nice to have a symbol here for that. So we can have like a tag symbol next to that. And then I feel like it would be nice here to also have the deadline here. So we can have like a deadline, the same clock really, we can use the same symbol. And then we can have a plus symbol for that as well. So that can be a bit consistent. So we have like a task, we can add tags, and we can also add a deadline. So let's enter edit task model. So we have these tags here. I feel like we can make this a flex layout instead. So if I do divider here and I do flex, and gap 1, then let's browse an icon for a label, see if we can find anything suitable. Let's have a quick look. Label. Is there anything that's a bit more rotated, perhaps? Or maybe more like a tag than a label. Yeah, that's way more like it. That's what I wanted. Tag. So I guess this is material design icon, so I'm not really sure what the difference is, but we can copy this MDI tag and use that here. And let's see now if I enter that. Oh, of course, we need to import that as well. Let's see. We have that tag there. Nice. I feel like that looks really nice. Then we can just center it vertically with some items center, of course. There we go. And then I want to use that symbol again that we have here to show that we can add a deadline. So now we can put that here, and then let's add a plus symbol for that as well, I feel like. So we can do span plus here and do cursor pointer on that one as well. Not that big of a fan of this design, but we can change it in the future. So we have this now. We can actually add an event handler for that. So we can do on click, so on deadline add or something like that, something clear. So what do we want to do when we click this button? I feel like there's kind of nice built-in date pickers already, you know, the built-in browser date pickers. We have stuff like input type date that we could use, but I feel like we don't need to show that date field. We can still have it there, but we don't need to really show it, but we can show a date picker. I think there's actually like a built-in, like a really new API that we can use to actually show a date picker without, you know, without having a user click it. So I feel like we can try that out, and maybe we can use some conditional rendering then. So we only show that date input whenever we click that button. So we can do something like adding deadline and set that as the false. We definitely should make this a component, by the way. We can do that when it works. So on deadline add, we can do adding deadline, set that to true, and then we can do some fancy conditional rendering. So we can do something like if adding deadline, then we want to show an input type field here. So input type date, I mean. So input type date, and see if that works. And boom, it appeared. Isn't that cool? So what I want to do now is actually use Svelte bindings. So we can actually bind this. We can bind the element here to a variable. So let's do something like deadline input, and this will be a HTML input element. Or null, and then we can set the default value here to be null since we don't have access to that immediately. Then of course, since we're using conditional rendering, this will not actually be available here. It will be available after this function has executed and set that deadline to true. So we need to add a short little timeout here. So we can do something like set timeout, and that should hopefully be like 1 tick, and then we can actually use some APIs. So I think there's actually a really modern API, so open date picker input, something like that. Open input date picker, new on the web, programmatically open a native date picker. That's exactly what I want. So there's actually a function called show picker that we can call on this deadline input, and hopefully that should show that native picker. So show picker, let's see if that works. And yes, it did. It showed that. Isn't that amazing? And of course, with these kind of new APIs, you should always be careful when using them, especially if you're targeting, you know, older devices and older browsers. Then always good to see what other alternatives are available. I'm not really sure if there's a way to do this out without a lot of hacky code, but we are really lucky that we have this available now, so we can use that. So whenever we click this button, we show the picker and we can select that. So now we want to handle when the user selects a date here, and this date is actually a string, so we need to parse that as well. But this should be very easy to, so I want to listen for it. Whenever this value here changes, we can handle that. So on change, on deadline change or something like that, and we can create a function for that on deadline change. and then we can get the value from that. So it should be super simple. So we can use the vanilla API for that. So deadline input dot value. We could bind it here as well, but like we discovered previously, when we bind something like this, the on change will actually run before that. So it would be kind of cumbersome to set like a timeout and stuff like that. We can simply just use it here since it will be available immediately here. So you have deadline input dot value that we can handle. So let's just try console logging that to see what we get. And let's see now if I select something here, select tomorrow, and boom, we get a date string here. And of course we need to parse this date string to some milliseconds now. But I feel like that is very easy as well in vanilla JavaScript. I think you can just do something like new date, and it should actually parse it for us. Let's try if that works. So if I do something like new date and then get time to get actual milliseconds, so ms, and then can log that out as well. So if I select something here and boom, we get some milliseconds. Isn't that amazing? So now we can actually change that, and that should be very easy. So we have data.deadline is ms. I guess we can just inline that, no need to create a variable for it. Boom. And I think that is all actually. Maybe we also want to handle, you know, saving to local storage and stuff like that. So we can do that now. When the user has changed the deadline, we can save to local storage. So let's try changing the deadline of this ADS task that we created earlier. If I change this to tomorrow and close, it shows tomorrow. Isn't that cool? If I change it to in 2 days and stuff like that, in 2 days, if I change it like 2 days ago, boom, 2 days ago, it works. Isn't that cool? Isn't that amazing? I feel like something we could also improve here is this deadline picker. We don't want to show this now, so I guess we can handle that some way. We don't want to show this. Why is this adding deadline true? I guess we're using this edit task modal, and when we're closing, we're not actually handling that. So I guess we can do something quick here. We can do something like adding deadline is false. Let's see how we're handling save to local storage. So that's a bit bad actually. We have 2 ways of closing now that we're not handling. So I guess on close, we actually want to handle when something happens. We on close, then we want to handle this as well. So save to local storage, just making the code a bit cleaner here, so we can so we don't have to repeat ourselves. So we set visible to false here when we close it here with this button, and then we handle on close, and on close we also want to run here with this modal. So the only difference is that the modal internally calls visible as false, and then we simply just call on close after that. So hopefully that should work now that we setting that to false. So if I reload now and I do something like this, I select something here, boom, and then I close this modal. I don't want to show that anymore, and I don't. So that's really nice. And then all that remains here is actually like handling a blur or something. Whenever we click somewhere else here, I don't want to show this deadline picker anymore. I'm not really sure if it's actually focusing it though. So let's see if I do something like on blur, if it will actually call that. So if I do something like on blur, a quick little anonymous function tests, and let's see now. So if I do that and I select somewhere else, it doesn't actually focus it. When I close that picker, I don't really know when I close that picker. Is there any way I can handle that? I'm thinking maybe I can do something like deadline input.focus. Let's see if that works. Let's see if I select something. If I click somewhere else now, and boom, it actually calls test. So I'm not really sure if that's bulletproof, but let's see here. If I click somewhere else, it definitely works here. But if I click clear or something, it's not really doing that anymore. You can see that it doesn't. It's really kind of a hacky way now to solve that. So is there any way to know if the native picker was closed? Okay, we have some really nice screensaver here on this website. JS native date picker closed event. Is there anything I can know? Catch the close event on close. All right. Let's see here. What is this? jQuery, of course. We don't want to use jQuery. Pure.js. Is it possible to do this in Pure.js? Use blur event. Let's see here. Maybe I can handle this maybe I can handle this as well. So maybe it's actually calling that here when I click the clear button. Let's see, test 2. If I click the clear button here now, it will kind of close it, but yeah, I'm not really sure about this. We want to remove it when we select something here. We want to remove it when we click out here. And we kind of also want to remove it when we click the clear button here. So yeah, it is actually calling that now. I'm not really sure what that was about previously, but if I handle this now and set this to deadline, of course this date is not working out, so we need to handle that and check the value first. So we can do something like const value, we get that value stored in a variable. We can just log it, see what we get. I'm assuming it's just gonna show like an empty string if we clear it or something. Let's see if I select something here. Select something there and then I clear it, what will we get here? We get an empty string, yeah. So we just want to handle if value is an empty string, then we can return here. I guess we can also do something with this date. I think this will like return not a number or null or something. I'm not really sure what happens if I pass an invalid date string here. So if I try doing that, if I just try passing in a string here, what do I get? Will it crash? Will it complain? What will happen? Nobody knows. Let's see here. If I select something, we have an invalid date. Let's have a quick look. Yes, invalid date. Maybe there's actually like a date parse that I can use instead. Let's see if I can use that instead. Maybe this causes an error. Yeah, it returns and not a number. Okay, I'm really confused about what happens if there's errors called or what's happening. If there's errors thrown or what happens. So if I do something like date.parse, I think this returns a number already. Yeah, it does. So that would actually be kind of useful to use anyways. If I handle this value, let's have a quick look and let's see value. If I do if is non-value, check if it's not a number, then we can return. Okay, the value here is not right. We want to handle date deadline instead. So deadline is not a number, and then data.deadline, we can set this to deadline instead. Let's see now if I set something here that's invalid. Well, if I clear it, then hopefully nothing should happen. Yeah. So let's have a quick look here. Date.parse. We need to know if this is throwing in other browsers or something like that. Need to make sure that we're writing return value. If the argument doesn't represent a valid date, nan is returned. So if this can be used, we can just check if it's nan, then it's an invalid date, and then we simply return early. So hopefully that should work. And if I select something now, select like tomorrow and close here, we can see tomorrow. Nice. So what I want to do now simply is that we simply set adding deadline to false here to hide that date picker now, hopefully, and boom, yeah, it works. Nice. Then we can simply do the same here for this blur event. So on date picker blur or something like that. Let's handle that over here on date picker blur. We can do adding deadline, set that to false here as well, and boom, it hides it. I think it's not really like completely bulletproof. There's probably ways to like, yeah, see it didn't really work here. Yeah, I'm not really sure. Maybe it will work. But what I noticed here is that we're actually not showing the deadline here as well, so we need to do that. So let's see if I can handle that. The thing is that we don't really want to show that with a plus symbol. It's not like we're going to be adding a new deadline when we already have a deadline. So maybe we actually want to use this input type date and actually not use that like programmatically. Isn't null, or we are adding a deadline. Then we show that date picker. And then simply else we can show that little cool plus symbol. Let's see how that looks. So now it shows that, and of course we're not binding this value. We need to show this, we need to convert that deadline into some string. So maybe I can handle this, set this value somehow. I think we can actually convert this into an ISO string or something. So if I do like date.parse and then I parse the data.deadline. Okay, this is gonna break, of course, since adding deadline might be false here. So this is gonna be kind of complicated actually. I feel like it would actually be easier here to use a function for this. So maybe I can do something like get deadline value. And maybe do something with that. So data.deadline. Let's see if I can handle this. So I'm gonna pass in the deadline number here, which will also be, it could also be null actually, so we need to handle that of course. So deadline, it will be number or null. And if it is null, if deadline is null, we simply return an empty string. I think that is fine. And that's kind of gonna become a problem, but I think not actually, since we're not gonna be showing it. If only adding deadline, then we're gonna be showing that anyway, so I feel like that's gonna be fine. And then deadline is null, otherwise you simply do something like new date deadline, so we can parse that, and then we can do something like to ISO string or something. I feel like that could be used in a date input. Let's see. No, it didn't really work, so you can do something like yes convert date to YYMMDD. Let's see, format JavaScript date. I think this is a bit fragile to use, but let's just try that real quick and see if it works. So split there, and yeah, that actually seems to be working. So nice, it actually shows the current date and it seems to be working actually, nice. So now we can actually change that here, but that kind of looks weird now when we have the symbol there on the other side. Okay, maybe we only want to show the symbol then if we don't have a deadline, so I guess we can do that as well. Why not? We only show the symbol if there is no deadline, and boom, there we go. I feel like that looks okay. It looks a bit weird here with this plus symbol still, not really sure how to solve that, but now hopefully you can actually change this still. So we have the same, we still have the same handler for that, we still have the same on change, so that is kind of the benefit here of using that on change there. So we can have on deadline change, and that should hopefully save that still and work. So let's see, if I change this now to tomorrow or something and I close the modal, it still shows tomorrow and yesterday and today as well. Now there is no way to actually remove the deadline, but perhaps we can implement that in the next episode, because this episode is becoming a bit long, so always good to keep it short and concise. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Feel free to like or dislike depending on what you thought of it, and also feel free to comment your thoughts and your opinions and how it's going with your to-do application. I would love to know. But other than that, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.